Hey, I want to welcome everyone back to the Lasting Freedom webinar series. I am your host, Constance Rhodes. I am the founder and CEO of a nonprofit called Finding Balance. We're a Christian nonprofit helping people find balance with food, weight, and wellness. Another way that you can look at that is we want to help you repair your relationship with food, your relationship with your body, and a lot of times that means repairing your relationship with God. And so what you're listening to today, if you're not one of our members, is our Lasting Freedom online support program. This is a program you can plug into from anywhere in the world. It runs 8 weeks at a time, and it provides community for you to work through eating issues toward freedom from them so that you are more free to impact your world the way that God has called you to. So you're listening to that today, and today we are talking about overcoming identity abuse. And I am excited to introduce you today to a gal that I just met out at Saddleback. We were there for a gathering a little time ago, the gathering on mental health in the church. And Elaine, you came up to our booth. You're Pastor Elaine Briefman. Tell us a little bit just about you, and then I want to talk about what you did in the booth, and that kind of kick us off today.
Well, I am happy to be here today. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I am an ordained elder in the Church of the Nazarene, and I'm also a state licensed marriage and family therapist. I was born and raised in the church from the very first days of my life, but I was adopted by this couple who actually ended up abusing me during that time of being raised in the church. And so in my later teen years, I ended up becoming an alcoholic and had a lot of other oral issues, and looking for Christian mental health was impossible to find. It was just impossible to find. And so I had always felt called once I became a Christian in my early 20s to go into the ministry and really help. But being divorced and a woman, it made it very complicated. So I ended up going to school to become a therapist, thinking that would be a way I could go back into the church and help women get help before they were forced to get help. Because at the age of 30, I was hospitalized 5 times for depression. And so basically was forced to get help at that point. And so it's my desire now that the rules of the church has changed. I was able to become ordained to really push forward and take what knowledge and experience that I have back into the church and help people find the healing that they need.
Well, you know, when you walked up to our booth at Saddleback, I feel like it might have been the last day. It was 104 degrees out there. We were tired. Everybody was tired and just kind of ready to pack up and head out. And you came up to our table, and so I'm just going to be transparent. My first thought was, oh no, what does this person want? You know, and you looked over. You kind of came up, you were talking about, a theory that you were working on for, you can talk a little bit more about it, but a theory that you had found that was very helpful to people who were healing. And then you turned and looked at one of our board members, Laura Lee Master, and you did a really cool thing. So I would love for you to just, take I don't know how long that is. It's not super long, but take a couple minutes and do that thing that you did there. That's a great way for us to get into this conversation.
So what this is, it's the story of the day that God made you. And so there was a day that God stopped everything that he was doing, and he took the cells of your body and he swirled them in his hands, and he thought about you. And he thought about the color of your eyes and the color of your hair and the shape of your toes. And he's excited. He says, this is good. This is good. He says, angels, come here, check it out, man. Look at who I'm making. And I'm like, wow, God, you've never made anything like that before. And he says, no, this is unique and different from anything I've ever made before. It's special. It's important to me. And he says, I love you. I love you so much. Everything about you matters to me. Your favorite food, your favorite color, the things that make you happy, that bring you joy, and the things that bring you sorrow and bring you pain. It matters so much to me. And it's my desire for you, as it is for everybody, that when I put you into the world, that you have 2 parents that tell you every day how much you matter to me. Every day. And sometimes parents don't do their job really well. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. And the world will come along and say, you know what? You don't have this, and you don't have that, and you don't know this, and you don't look like that, and you don't have this education or live here. You don't sound right. And sometimes it'll get really hard for you to hear my voice and to remember how much I really love you. And the world really try hard. Evil tries really hard to keep you from hearing my voice about how much you matter to me. But I want you to know that no matter where you go, no matter what you do, I'm right by your side. Every moment of every day. I go before you in all that you do, and I come behind you in all that you do. And I have all of these angels waiting to come by your side. All you have to do is ask. And I want you to know that I will never abandon you. Never. And I will never be disappointed in you. Now, I might be disappointed in some things that you say, or some things that you do, or some things that you think about. But I will never be disappointed in who you are, because you are exactly who I created you to be. I am your biggest cheerleader. And I want you to know that someday when I see you again, I can't wait to give you a great big hug. And I hope you remember that every day for the rest of your life. And that's the Creation Day story.
Just want to pause for a minute. I want you guys to think about what you just heard. And I want you to think about what you're feeling. And I want you to think about the thoughts that immediately came into your head while you were watching that. If you are anything like me or like lots of people that I know, it may be easier for you to believe that Creation Day story for someone else than for yourself. You can hear that and you can think, oh, that's awesome. But I want you to tell you that day when Pastor Elaine did that to Laura in our booth, it took about 4 seconds for her to start crying, because there's something about hearing that spoken over you directly that is so powerful. If you're listening today, you can find another video of that online. If you want to watch it again, I know at your website, Identity Abuse, is that right? IdentityAbuse.com, Pastor Elaine. But I want you guys, I just want to challenge you this week, especially our members, to watch that again and maybe a couple of times. As we go into our points today, the first point there is that you are uniquely created and eternally valuable to Almighty God, which is a little bit about, it's a little reinforcement of what you just shared, but talk to us about that, Pastor Elaine. And for many listening to this, maybe they've even been raised in the church where everything you just said is complete opposite of what they thought God thought about them. So let's just jump into some of this.
Well, I realized that for myself, that I didn't believe that I was who God created me to be, because I had been abused, and because of the decisions that I had made after that, that I would never be who God wanted me to be, that I was too damaged to ever be resurrected to something usable. Mm-hmm. And God revealed the terms identity abuse to me. I was thinking about all these people I was trying to help, and whether they had mental health issues or spiritual issues. And so many people say, I can't believe that God loves me. Mm-hmm. They can believe it for somebody else, but not themselves. And so to get to that place where I could say, is there a simpler answer? And the words identity abuse came through my mind. I was sitting on my couch and those words came through my mind. And I thought for 3 days, which is a long time for me to think about something because I'm a fast thinker, I thought, what would happen if my identity that God gave me was abused? If we really believe that we are eternally valuable, that he created us and he's looking forward to seeing us again, and we really believe that, it changes everything. And so many times we have a legalistic view of God, that we have to earn that. And if we just believed that it's true, and as Christians, that's what we believe is true. We're supposed to believe that's true. We actually choose to believe it. So I have a little sign in my office that says, choose to believe. What do we choose to believe? Is so impactful. God does love us, and we have to believe those are facts, and not based on how we feel on any given day.
Well, the enemy, this sexual abuse, and it's interesting because each cycle that we have for Lasting Freedom, I don't always know on the front end how it's all going to fall out. And then we record these sessions, and then I see patterns. So the pattern for this cycle, for whatever reason, is hitting a lot of sexual abuse and just abuse in general. And what you're saying is, I could see that when we think about sexual abuse, maybe we're perhaps thinking more even about the physical part of that and the emotional part, but I don't know that I ever actually thought about the identity part, that so much of what is happening in that action is stealing what you just said, your God-given identity, or shaking our belief in that identity. And so I know that people are watching and listening to this right now and wondering, how in the world do I ever reclaim that after, so many years and so many trials?
Well, the second point being about evil lying, evil lies, and we have to get to the place where we can say, are the things that I believe about myself from God or from evil? And they come from either one or the other. It's either something that God would come and say is true about us, and these are facts, these aren't feelings. And so often I hear people saying, if people would, if I just could prove myself, then people would love me. And often I'll have these conversations in secular venues where we just talk about your identity, and I say, that little part of you that tries so hard to prove that you're good, that's the part of you that God created, that part of you that knows that you're good. So deep down inside, you do know that you're good, but the world has tried to convince you, and evil has tried to convince you that you're not in the world, and that you spend all this energy trying to prove that. So when we go to that little place where we know God created me, and this is a good spot, and I don't have to prove it anymore. I can just be that and fight the lies that are telling me you have to prove yourself. Then there's a lot of freedom in that.
So you just mentioned it. Point number 2 there, for those of you following along on your action sheets. Evil forces always lie, always. And then let's then get to number 3, because we wonder, how do we deal with it? And you said an important step there is we need to identify when the lies began and who instilled them. So how does a person begin to kind of go back in time to where those lies began?
The easiest way I help people do that is to ask them, what is the worst, it sounds terrible, what is the worst thing that you think about yourself? Which is, I'm unlovable, or I'm easily forgettable, or I don't matter. And then think back in time, the first time you remember feeling that way. What were the circumstances around that? And really grasping where that message came from. And really understanding it didn't come from you. A lot of people say, well, I always felt that way, so it came from me. Well, children aren't raised with that concept. I mean, children aren't, God didn't create a being that grows up feeling that way. We're taught that from some external force, whether it's intentional or unintentional. And it's really identifying, where did that message first begin?
Yeah, because if you think about, so I have 3 kids, and when I think about them, they are born thinking that they're the bomb. Like, they think they're awesome and everything they want matters, and you are wrong if you don't deliver what they want, right? And then somewhere along the way we learn, no, we're wrong for wanting or needing, and so don't ever be a burden, so don't ask out of people. It really shifts somewhere along the way. Usually, don't they say that usually by the age of 6, a lot of that stuff has been instilled already, and then we spend the rest of our lives, operating out of the belief that having needs and wants is wrong, and that we're wrong, and that we're bad. But I want to go back to something that you just said, because it's kind of interesting. So you talked about that deep part of us that wants to feel good and wants to be good, and how that's actually evidence of our God-given nature. Can you talk more about that? Because that's an interesting thing. We talk in recovery work about fractured selves and how there's different components of who we are and who we become. But I love the idea of thinking of sort of reclaiming the dignity of that part of us that does want to be who God created us to be. So you're saying that's not a bad thing. That's who God made us to be deep down there somewhere.
Right. I think the biggest example of that I have seen is I had a client who was a narcissist, and narcissists usually have the lowest self-esteem of anybody, and most people don't realize that. But and spending some time with him in the same exact conversation, and telling him that part of you that's always trying to prove yourself is proof of the damage that's done. And we went back in time, and he said he was really rejected as a child, and he could tell me who it was and the circumstances. And I just remember that day where he said, you mean I never have to prove myself ever again? And I said, no. God loves you for who you are, for who he created you to be, right here, right now, in the moment, in the reality of the internal self of who you are, your spirit. That's who he created, and he loves that. And he wept for about 40 minutes and dynamically changed, and calls me every year on that day to remind me that of this is the day that I realize that who I am is okay. And every year it floors me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually working on a book. You see my little necklace, this more than a number insignia, and the tagline is "Who you are is already enough," which is not something that I believe personally yet. Like I want to believe that, and I am making strides toward believing that. But as I've mentioned that subtitle to other people, they're like, the giant exhale that could come if we really would believe that we were enough. And I don't know that I've met hardly anyone. No one immediately comes to mind who actually believes that they are enough and lives like they are enough. And yet, if we could live that way, so much of the pressure that we carry would be gone, right?
Yes. It's an amazingly freeing thing to be able to say, I, in and of myself, am okay, and God loves that. And one of the things that I tell people is that God created a world that has everything in it that we need to survive, everything. And he's like, hey, go and enjoy it. And just remember me. And if we actually live with that concept that we're okay, and he created us and gave us this great planet, and we're going to go and enjoy it, it dynamically changes the way we perceive ourselves. But when we start getting into culture and income and education, and all of a sudden all our inadequacies show up. But if we were just in the world the way God originally created it, most of that stuff wouldn't exist today.
I love this way that you talk about God, because it's very casual. It's like, hey, come on, enjoy, like whatever. And I would be interested to know what was a turning point for you in being able to embrace some of these truths for yourself, given the past that you mentioned earlier, a little bit of your story.
Well, it really was only 3 years ago, and I was looking at ordination, and I knew that I was going to have to go in front of a couple hundred people and stand there and say, I'm filled with the Holy Spirit. And I didn't think I could do it. And I thought, I'm not going to go and lie on your ordination day as the last thing you want to do. And I had made this habit of going and praying every day, once a week with God, and having Sabbath time. And I went up on my hill and I got on my knees, which I normally don't do. And I said, I don't want to get up from here unless I know this isn't until I know this isn't out of my own power. I said, I can't do this out of my own power. And in those moments in time, I call it a vision, but it was very real to me. Jesus walks up to me and he holds out his hands to me and he says, let's go play.
Huh.
And he has this huge grin on his face and his eyes are just like sparkly. And he's like, let's go play. And I'm like, and I didn't respond, but I'm thinking in my head, are you kidding me? I mean, you know who I am, you know my junk, and I've got these little boxes of really pretty junk over here, so I look over to my left, thinking to God, thinking, okay, God, you got to get me out of this because he wants me to go play. I'm like, who does that? And God, I just see his face, and he just stone face looks at me, nonplussed, and he goes, I don't look at that anymore.
Mm.
And I'm like, and he goes, and he paid the price, so I don't have to.
Mm.
And so I'm sitting here thinking, okay, God's going, I don't see the problem. And Jesus is like, let's go play. And I got up and I said, if that's true, then you will never shame me for my past again. I'm all in 100%. Everything I was ever raised with, ever heard, ever saw, read, heard, whatever, 100%, I'm in 100%. And immediately the devil's on my shoulder saying, you're going to look like a fool.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, that's the old me and I'm not going back. If I have to look like a fool, and when I tell the story, people go, I'd rather do that and see people find peace and freedom. That doesn't matter to me anymore. And that day changed my life. And I have spent every moment of every day since then saying, what happened on that hill that day is I made a choice. I made a choice to believe the truth about who God is and what Jesus did was efficacious for me and everybody on the planet. And I'm not going to give in to the lies of the devil. And it's changed everything that I do.
Wow. I love that. I remember one time I was at a listening retreat, which is hard for me because you're supposed to be quiet and you're not supposed to do anything, which is the harder part. I like to be quiet. And it was several years back, and everything was in my life was really hard at the time. And I'd been doing this same work and without a lot of success. It was just a heavy burden. And I remember being there, and then all of a sudden it was like God said, you've wrestled well. And it was the complete opposite of what I had anticipated, because I was thinking of all the things that I hadn't done right, kind of like you with your boxes on the hill, but I do this wrong and that and that and that. And then all of a sudden the message that came to me was, you're wrestling well. And I don't know why. It was kind of like your hilltop experience. It was, wait a second, this is shifting my paradigm of what I think the conversation with God is and what he's looking at and what I'm looking at. And I think sometimes that it can be hard for us to have those moments. So I wonder if a great idea for people who are listening is just like, you went to that hill and I went to that boring retreat, right? But there was that intentionality of, I need to hear from you. And I would guess that those who are listening, there's such a continuum of abuse and of confusion and of judgment, even from, especially sometimes from within the church. But God has a unique way of reaching each one of us if we'll just kind of venture out there. And I love also that you said you felt Satan, immediately in that moment jumping in to have his say, but you knew that, you were wise to that, and you chose to put him where he goes. And so that's actually point 4, practice choosing truth. What are some other ways that people can actually choose truth?
The hardest part about this is being able to focus on fact versus emotion. That's the thing I probably work at the longest in my office, is really helping people delineate between fact and feeling. Mm-hmm. And so getting to the place where you can state even the facts about your feelings versus just experiencing your feelings is primary, and acknowledging I am having a feeling and what is the fact behind that feeling. And then you can say, okay, is that fact behind that feeling really a truthful fact? So I can say, well, I'm feeling insecure because I'm wearing the same clothes that somebody else is wearing. And so the feeling is insecurity. The fact is I'm wearing the same thing. Well, is that fact really that bad? Is the fact, because men don't have that problem. Women do, but men are like, hey, good outfit. Women are like, I got to go change. And it's really being able to then talk about, what is the fact that I'm wearing the same things as somebody else going to keep me from being able to enjoy the moment and the time that I'm at wherever I'm at, whatever I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And learning how to really look at facts over feeling. And then you have to go to biblical truth. I often ask people in my office, if God were to walk into my office right now and look you in the eye, would he say what you're telling me you think about yourself? Would he say you? And oftentimes it's no. And most of the time it's no, because they have an inaccurate view of themselves, because they have an inaccurate view of God.
Gosh, that's an interesting question. I thought what you were going to say is, if God walked into the room, what would you do? So you threw me there. Would God say that what you're telling me about you is what he feels about you too? Now, a lot of people would say yes. Like, yes, I think he thinks I'm overweight. I'm not taking care of my body. I'm not eating what Jesus ate. I'm, whatever the list is of all of those things. How does somebody who's raised like in that kind of environment begin to shift that view?
Well, I was raised in a very legalistic environment, which is really strange. No movies, no swearing, no smoking. We did devotionals every night after supper, church all the time. But I was sexually abused and physically abused my entire life. So I had the performance thing down. I was the best hypocrite. I was trained by the best hypocrites, and God had to show me that it was who I am that was of value. And so when we get into those listings of I didn't do this right, do that, because I'll ask people, what does God think of you? What's one of the first questions I ask them when they come in counseling? What does God think of you? Well, I should pray more, this more, that more. I don't do this, I don't do that. And it's like, those are all behaviors. But what does he think about who you are? Who are you as a person? And they'll say, well, I'm kind and caring, and I try to help, and I'm loving. And those are the parts that we minimize because we're so in our culture focused on the externals and behavior. So I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No, totally. Yeah. Who are you as a person? And I love, that you listed off a few of those, like I'm kind, or I would serve others, or etc. I think a lot of times we don't. We think that those are just little things, we're focusing more on the things that we aren't. But it's important to look at that. Point number 5, let's spend a little time here. You talk about how important it is to actually mourn the losses that we have experienced. Can you talk about what some of those losses are, especially as it relates to those who've been abused in some way by others? And how do you properly mourn that? And how long does that take?
Um, so it doesn't take as long as most people believe. The biggest issue is the fear of feeling the pain. People are afraid if I go back into my past and actually feel how that felt again, I won't be able to tolerate it.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of it is getting over that fear, and then being able to say, and I have people write this down. What are some of the things that you lost? The biggest thing that people lose are their sense of innocence, their actual innocence, depending on the loss that they had. Also, the second biggest loss is the loss of healthy models of healthy relationships. And so they lose healthy parenting models, but also healthy spousal models. So if you have an abusive relationship, let's just say a father's an alcoholic, you don't get to see what does a healthy dad look like. So then when you're married and you have a husband, what is a healthy dad? You wouldn't even know, is this guy being a healthy dad? You just don't have that. And also you don't have the healthy spouse model. So what does a healthy husband look like? Because you weren't raised with that. And so that can go with anybody in the family. And like you said earlier, by the age of 6, you've pretty much figured out relationships in general. And so you know who is safe to approach, when are they safe to approach, when you approach them, what kind of reaction are you going to get? And that starts in infancy. If I cry, does somebody come and respond? How long does it take for them to respond? Depending on who responds, am I going to get pain or am I going to get help? And so a lot of those relational things are the things that we lose. And so in the loss of innocence, we also end up if it's a sexual abuse issue, you end up with promiscuity. So then you lose your own innocence in that regard of being able to say having an innocent childhood free from the promiscuity issues that arise. And so being able to actually look at all of the things, if I was raised by God, I usually tell people, you were protected. What are the things that are in your life that wouldn't be if that were the case? And so listing all those things down and saying, okay, I'm going to mourn the loss of the mother that I never had and never knew. And really going through the grieving, then you leave the emotions there, and they don't follow you into further relationships, because otherwise they're compounded and they ooze out in weird places because you haven't dealt with them, and you're actually able to leave them in the past. And that's the most victorious thing is yes, I did not have the mother that I needed. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. I didn't choose it. It was not my fault. It's a very sad thing. And cry if it makes you cry. It's okay, because it's a sad thing. When we deny those emotions that are attached to those things, then those emotions get attached to unhealthy things.
Mm-hmm. How do you help people reconcile the "where was God when this happened" question?
Well, I really go back to that little story and say, it's my desire that you have two parents. It's my desire as God that you have two parents who do tell you and do protect you and do, and that's my desire for everybody. But sin has entered the world, and because sinful people make sinful choices and have sinful desires, and when they do sinful behavior, that doesn't mean that God's desire for that person has changed, but they have made this free will choice to live outside the will of God. And sadly, then many helpless children are the victims of that.
Yeah. And yet, would you believe that God was still present with you even in that moment of trial?
Oh, definitely. And a lot of people will tell me that. They'll say, I prayed and I heard God, and there's times they'll say that they don't understand why they went through, but they knew God was there. And the whys, I learned several years ago to quit asking God why, because it's a bad question.
Yeah.
And years down the road, maybe we'll figure it out, but we might not figure it out until we're at the other side. But God is always present, and He does care. And I tell people, God cries when His children are hurt. I mean, he all the rule. I was telling somebody last week that the 10 Commandments, like, don't cheat because this is my baby, and when you cheat my baby, it hurts me. And don't lie and don't covet because this is my baby, and I don't want you coveting my baby's stuff. And I don't want, if we look at it from the daddy-child perspective, that he's trying to protect us, and he doesn't want these other people doing stuff to his baby, and that's why he sets those up. not because he wants to be this mean dictator, but because he cares.
Okay, so point number 6, you say, is to learn healthy bonding and relating. So if you didn't see that when you were growing up, what are some ways that you would recommend people could go about figuring that piece out?
That has been really kind of my biggest challenge at this point in my ministry is seeing how I can condense that into some fashion. The best thing I tell people is find somebody who has a good marriage or is a healthy parent, and then go and sit and talk with them and seek help. I be specific. Say, I don't know how to have a healthy relational communication style. What does bonding between partners look like? Some of that is going over the 5 love languages and saying, can I do those things? Do I know how to do those things? What does healthy touch look like? What does active listening really look like? I mean, those areas of relationship that are that you feel awkward in, find somebody who you see who does that well and ask them. And as the body of Christ, we should be willing to reach out to each other and say, hey, I can help you with that. I can show you what I did or what works for us, or refer you to somebody who does. It's probably the most awkward portion of all of this, because you have to go to somebody and say, I don't really know how to relate. And a lot of men really have a lot of problem with that, of confessing, I don't know how to relate, because they had absent dads or whatever, and teaching them listening is the biggest issue, and then responding to that listening with action that's related to it. And then if you don't get it right, say, okay, how could I do it better? And no, it's a learning process. It's okay to be in a learning process than to just wing it and hope that you're doing it right, and then get it. I see people get offended that well, I'm doing the best that I can. But if you're not pressing yourself to be better and knowing that there's a deficit there, then you're not only inhibiting your own relationship, but then those around you as well.
Well, and it makes me think also then about the other side of the equation, which is that in healthy community, if we recognize that someone we're walking with has unhealthy boundaries or unhealthy ways of relating, that we have a responsibility in love and with care and with wisdom and with balance to let them know, right? So sometimes someone's in our life who annoys the crap out of us, and what do? We would generally just not take their calls or basically reject them, right? Which is not at all going to help any change there. It just ends the relationship. Whereas if we could be courageous to say, hey, when you did such and such, I found it offensive. Or, hey, when you call 15 times a day, like that's more than I need. Like, I'm not wired for that much interaction. What if whatever, like if we could be honest with each other, we could help each other grow as well, instead of just always running away from each other because we think the other person can't handle any truth. That's what keeps us, I think, more and more isolated.
True. And I know that I used to wear a little button that says judge me, because when I was first a Christian, I did a lot of really dumb stuff and had no clue how dumb it was until I'd been a Christian for a while. And I thought, why didn't somebody tell me? But you really probably shouldn't wear that thing to this event. It's like, why didn't somebody say something to me? And I tell people that all the time. I mean, like, women are always saying, when your tag's hanging out in the back, thank you for telling me. It's like, don't be afraid to go and tell somebody, hey, that's probably not quite, the proper thing to do. And again, you're doing it out of helping them be more, I don't want to just say socially appropriate, but, it's you're helping them. It's not a judging thing.
Yeah, but so the enemy is so quick to say, well, who do you think that you are, that you should da 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 da? He's always trying to get us to shut our mouths and be silenced, and not. It's kind of like when you're at church. This doesn't happen a lot in my church, but because it's such a big church that the stage would get overrun. But in church, and they say, who has a testimony? And the enemy whispers to you, you shouldn't raise your hand because you're being prideful if you raise your hand, or something corny like that, right? And we all just shut up and sit down and be quiet, when really, we should be jumping out there. Go ahead.
I have this favorite saying of mine, and I don't have my Bible handy, but the Bible is just made up of stories about God and people. It's the whole thing is just testimonies. And you can take your story and slap it on the back of that and not change the intent of the scripture, which is to give God glory for in the lives of people. And so your story, I mean, there's some pretty ugly stories in the Bible, and there's some pretty glorious stories in the Bible, and we fall usually someplace in the middle of there. And so everybody has a story about their relationship with God and the history of their life with God, and no one should ever be ashamed to share that with somebody, because it's all valuable. It's all valuable.
Yeah. Okay, well, as we're kind of wrapping up here, what any final thoughts do you want to share with those who are listening to this today? Again, some of them may be looking at you, looking at me, thinking, oh, they've got it all figured out, and I never will. You know, we have that tendency to think that when we see others just speaking about stuff. But any final thoughts, encouragement that you'd like to share with those who are listening?
I was a throwaway baby and learned the hard way. And it's my hope that people don't have to learn the hard way anymore. That you are valuable. You are eternally valuable and uniquely valuable. And evil always lies. Those are the 3 points. Evil, you are uniquely valuable. Evil always lies, and you can choose to believe the truth. And I have to make that conscious choice on a regular basis. The world and the devil just loves the fact that I'm in ministry. He just pounces on me all the time, and he loves to taunt me and tempt me, and I have to choose on a regular basis how am I going to respond to that. And it's an ongoing war that we're in until we reach the other side. And it's my hope and desire that this has given people some hope. Hope is always the one thing that I want people to have when they've met with me. And I hope that this has done that for them.
Well, and you know, again, I don't really know you personally at all, but just the little bit that you've shared of the difficult story of your life, and then the joy that I see in your eyes, and I saw it that day at Saddleback when you smiled at my friend Laura, and the smile I see right now. It is very Jesus and very inspiring and very hope-giving. So I'm really grateful to you for coming on and being on with us. Again, my guest was Pastor Elaine Briefman. You can learn more about her at her website, which is identityofuse.com. And I want to just thank our sponsors, which are Selah House, Timberline Knolls, and Interact Counseling, and also the Kirsten Haglund Foundation that helps provide scholarships for the Lasting Freedom Program. Again, if you're listening today and you want to jump in, repair your relationship with food, walk in community, I'd love for you to learn more about that at findingbalance.com. But thanks again, Pastor Elaine, and we will look forward to seeing the rest of you on the next webinar. Bye-bye.